Several states have proposed legislation that will promote renewable energy. The first solar project is underway in Central California that combines solar and storage with irrigation canals. And Tesla has announced that they'll begin allowing vehicles other than Teslas to use their charging stations. I'm Jay Warmke with Blue Rock Station, and this is the news from the solar industry for the week of February 20th. Well, the first story here is that Maryland legislature is considering a bill that will increase solar grants that are given to homeowners, increase them from $1,000, which currently is the case, to $5,000. Now, the state has set a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 60% by 2032 and to be net zero by 2045. Now, these grants will be funded by penalties assessed to companies that don't meet these greenhouse goals. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy has announced recently on February 14th at Rutgers University that the 100% clean energy goal that the state has in place will be moved up from 2050 to 2035, so moved up 15 years ahead of original schedule. They also announced that they will be giving grants to transition to electric vehicles to residents of New Jersey, and also that the goal now is that no new cars in the state of New Jersey that are powered by gasoline engines can be sold after the year 2035. Dubbed Project Nexus, a project is underway in Central California, actually run by a company called Solar Aquagrid, and it is the first solar plus storage grid-connected system that will be installed over irrigation canals. Now, in the state of California, there are over 4,000 miles of these canals, and a study by the University of California has found that about 13 gigawatts of solar power could be installed over this canal network, and then that would include about 3 gigawatts of storage as part of the system. Now, the goal of this is to not only produce solar electricity, but also to reduce evaporation from these canals. In fact, it's estimated that if we covered the canals with solar arrays, you would save about 63 billion gallons of water each year, which is enough to provide water to about 2 million residents there. And plus, by putting these solar arrays on the canals, you're not taking up valuable farmland that might otherwise be used for solar arrays. McDonald's has announced that they're buying all of the power from an installation. It's a 180 megawatt installation in Louisiana. Now, this is part of their process of trying to become net zero by 2050. So they're beginning to buy a lot of solar power to power the various restaurants that they operate. Now, this particular project is run by Lightsource BP, a subsidiary of British Petroleum, and will provide enough power to power about 630 restaurants. Now, an interesting thing about McDonald's is in December of last year, they began a process where not only are they purchasing power, they're called power purchase agreements, from these large solar arrays for their own restaurants, but they're packaging in their providers, their small suppliers of materials that otherwise couldn't afford these power purchase agreements. They're bundling those in, so they're beginning to bring in a group of people who will receive power from these solar arrays. Tesla has announced that they'll begin opening up their charging stations to vehicles other than Teslas. In fact, they say by the end of 2024, they'll have opened up about 7,500 of these charging stations to non-Tesla vehicles. Now, this is part of a nationwide expansion of EV charging stations. In fact, Hertz and British Petroleum, BP, has announced a partnership where they're going to begin installing a national network of charging stations. Now, many of these will be called what they refer to as gigahubs. These are large charging stations located in high traffic areas such as airports, along highways, and really focused a lot on call or hire vehicles, taxis and things like Uber and the like. In fact, studies have shown that these vehicles like Uber, even though they only represent about 2.5% of the vehicles on the road, they do represent about 30% of all of the charging from public charging stations. So they're catering directly to that. Hertz has also announced that by the end of 2024, 1/4 of their fleet of rental vehicles will be EVs. They're beginning to try and transition very early into the electric vehicles, and they're beginning to provide this network of charging stations that will help support that network of rental vehicles. General Motors is taking a little different approach. They've announced that they're going to begin installing about 40,000 level 2 charging stations. These are the 240 volt stations like you might install at your home. But they're going to be installing these in communities around the country in an effort to begin to create an infrastructure of charging as all of the major automobile manufacturers transition to electric vehicles. And finally, a poll in Texas by the University of Houston has said that even in Texas, they support the transition to renewable energy. In fact, this poll shows that about 64% of Texans support solar as a transition medium for the grid. 59% support geothermal, 57% wind, and only about 41% support the ongoing use of nuclear power as well as natural gas. A full 90% support net metering systems where the utility pays retail for what is being exported to the grid, and about 82% of those polled support government subsidies for the adoption of solar. And that's the news from the solar industry for this week. We'll see you next week.